In 2016, the family of a man suffering from Alzheimer's decided that it was time to move him into an assisted living home. After the 82-year-old been relocated to his new living situation, one of his distant relatives, named Paul Russel, remembered that he had owned a cat. Russell went to the house to retrieve the pet. He made a discovery there that left him absolutely stunned. In 2016, when an 82-year-old man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania could no longer take care of himself and was relocated to a nursing home, his distant relative Paul Russel stepped in to help. Russell and his family took it upon themselves to pack up the house and all of his belongings. It was a considerable task since he had lived there for many years. Russell didn't know much about his relative and knew even less about the home. Of course, the decision to place the man in a nursing home was not an easy one. Taking a relative away from their house and removing their sense of independence is hard for anyone to do. However, at that point, the man needed to be cared for around the clock, and the family figured this would be the best for everyone. He especially couldn't live alone anymore as his memory worsened and he wasn't able to recognize people. Russell was able to bring his relative to assisted living and make sure that he was comfortable. When asked what needed to be taken care of, back at the house, his relative didn't mention anything beyond packing things up and making sure they're stored safely. As Russell left the assisted living complex, he remembered that his relative owned a cat. He recalled that it was a Siamese cat named Siam. Russell returned to his relative's house and was able to locate the Siamese cat, Siam, without much trouble. He looked healthy and calm. Russell believed it wouldn't be difficult to take him from the house to make sure that he was cared for. He began trying to coax the cat to come over to him. As he was getting ready to leave the house and make the drive home, someone mentioned that his relative might have a second cat as well. After locating Siam, Russell began looking for the second cat. While he was looking for the mystery cat, a fuzzy object darted from under a bed, across the house and down into the cellar. Russell noticed that it looked like the cat had a blanket draped over it. Russell looked down into the cellar, calling for the cat, but didn't have any luck. He decided to come back the next day with a flashlight and more food to investigate. The next day, when Russell returned, he came prepared with more food and a flashlight. He described the experience as something out of a horror scene. He was going down into a basement with nothing but a flashlight, looking for something he wasn't sure what it really was. On top of that, with his relative's memory fading, he had no clue what else could be waiting for him down the staircase. So Russell told People magazine, "I went down into the creepy old cellar, and it was hunkered in a corner. He couldn't believe his eyes that what he was staring at was indeed a cat." He said that the poor thing looked scared and in terrible pain. What Russell had found was indeed his elderly relative's second cat. Russell could see that it was a female calico cat, but he could scarcely tell it was a cat at all. What Russell thought was a blanket draped over the cat was actually years' worth of the cat's own hair. The cat was also overweight, which didn't help with its mobility. To make things worse, the cat's hair had become matted and tangled into dreadlocks that were over 8 inches long. Even worse, the matted and tangled fur was covered with the cat's own waist. It was a terrible sight, and Russell felt just awful for the cat. But so Nurse Russell named the newfound cat Heidi because she was constantly hiding under the bed and other places around the house. She was clearly traumatized, uncomfortable, and in a lot of pain. Since Russell and his wife Jill are both animal lovers, they spent a lot of time trying to coax Siam and Heidi out of the house in order to take Heidi to a vet. They knew she needed help right away. Once Heidi realized that she wasn't in any immediate danger, she began to trust Russell and Jill until they finally were able to pick her up and take her to the Animal Rescue League Wildlife Shelter in Pittsburgh. Aside from Heidi's condition, both of the cats were old, around 17 years. Both Siam and Heidi were in dire need of a checkup. On top of that, Heidi's situation proved to be life-threatening. Unsurprisingly, the veterinarian team was in shock when they first saw Heidi. They were so baffled by her dreadlocks that they even had to go online in order to look up what kind of condition she might be suffering from. After extensive research, they still couldn't find an answer. Although they couldn't find what exactly was wrong with her, they knew they needed to do something to help her immediately. They needed to remove the hair to relieve her from their pain. but they also didn't want to hurt her in the process. Finally, they came up with what they believed to be the best solution to their problem. They decided to shave it off. So, in order to calm Heidi and alleviate her pain, they put her under general anesthesia so that the vet team could go to work. In the end, it took hours to shave off all of the cat's excess hair. In total, Heidi had been carrying around an extra 2 pounds of hair this whole time, which was stretching and pulling on her skin underneath. She was also overweight and looked to be in bad condition compared to Siem. At first, the vets believed that Heidi had some sort of condition that caused her fur to grow the way it did. However, they later concluded that it was Heidi's weight that was the source of the problem. Cats groom themselves frequently throughout the day, however. If a cat is overweight, this becomes harder for them to do. The hair that had become stuck in Heidi's fur had nowhere else to go since she couldn't groom it off of herself. So it began to grow and clump together so bad that there was nothing that Heidi could ever do to stop it. When it comes to long-haired cats like calicos, their owners are also supposed to help out and brush them regularly because of their extra hair. Since Heidi's owner could hardly take care of himself, it is likely that he wasn't up for the task of taking care of Heidi either. In the years that Heidi's elderly owner suffered from Alzheimer's, Heidi's hair grew out of control and she became trapped beneath her own fur with no chance of escape. What was once a healthy cat had become skittish and miserable because of neglect. After both cats had been treated and vaccinated, the Russells decided to give both cats a new chance at life. The couple adopted the 2 cats into their home in Churchill, Pennsylvania, where they would become members of the family along with their other 3 cats and 2 dogs. Of course, the transition wasn't all that smooth for Heidi. Not only did she have to learn to live with 2 human owners and all of the other animals, she also had to learn to live without all of her old excess fur. Over time, she slowly became more comfortable, however. She was still traumatized from her past. Initially, Heidi was incredibly afraid and skittish, so much that she would shudder and shake whenever anyone even came near her. Thankfully, over time, Heidi began to come around after becoming familiar with her new surroundings and fellow pets. After the Russells earned her trust, it was smooth sailing from there. Although the process was slow and arduous, Jill had faith that eventually Heidi would become comfortable enough to play with the other animals. She knew that not only would this help with her social issues, but would also help her get back into shape. Although at first Heidi was timid and liked to hide under the bed at the Russells, they knew she needed to learn affection. So they began taking her out in the open and holding her on their lap. Eventually, she began coming out from under the bed herself for attention. She even started purring, showing that she was enjoying her new home. She even got her own special cat bed and has now come into her own. Today, she loves playing with her other friends in the house and even enjoys the company of people who come to visit her on her cat bed. Almost immediately after the shelter posted Heidi's story online, the story was told in magazines, newspapers, and television stations everywhere. It was shocking to everybody, and people were outraged for a variety of different reasons and weren't afraid to express their opinions. Initially, people were in disbelief that anyone could let an animal become in such a state. Several people immediately put the blame on the owner without realizing that the man had been suffering from Alzheimer's. Others, however, were outraged for entirely different reasons. Other people that took the time to read deeper into the story came to understand that it wasn't necessarily the owner's fault for the condition that Heidi was in. It then became an issue of elderly neglect and not animal neglect. People began to point out that the elderly man should have been checked up on more for his own safety, if not for the animals. People began to wonder if this is what the animals looked like, then what did the man look like? Someone was bound to notice Heidi at least once if people had come to visit more frequently than they apparently did. Some people didn't blame the owner or cry elderly neglect. They were so astonished by the photos and stories that they claimed the entire thing was a hoax altogether. Not only could they not wrap their heads around that kind of neglect, they also refused to believe that a cat would just stop grooming itself. While one comment demonstrated a woman's firm beliefs that the photo was fake, she was quickly corrected. Animal rescue organizations from all over explained that what happened to Heidi is entirely possible and that she was lucky to be found when she was. While most of us that have cats rarely have to groom them ourselves, some people couldn't believe that Heidi would just stop grooming herself. What they fail to understand is that in certain situations, especially when their health is affected, cats will stop doing so. While Heidi's case may be rare, it is possible for it to happen to other cats and most likely has. Thankfully, most cat owners are likely to catch something like this before it ever happens to their cat. The main reason that it happened to Heidi was because her situation was the perfect storm for something like that to happen. On December 16, 2016, just one day after Heidi had been brought into the animal shelter, the team made a public announcement. Staff members of the Animal Rescue League Shelter Wildlife Center posted on Facebook in order to create awareness about forgotten elderly citizens and their pets. The post read, "Please remember to not only check on the elderly in your community, but also check on their animals to prevent instances like this from happening in the future." The vets knew that Heidi was going to be okay, but felt it was important to remind people so that this doesn't happen again. A multitude of research has proven that pets help to relieve the stress that some elderly experience, especially when they are plagued with an illness. They help to reduce blood pressure, keep the owner active, and help with social interaction. Animals are an easy way for the elderly to take their mind off of things, which is greatly beneficial to mental and physical health. Pets can also help with long-term memory, which is very helpful for people with Alzheimer's. It's different than remembering a person and they don't ask for anything except love and attention. However, it's essential that the only time an elderly person has a pet is if they're being looked after, or if they're aware enough to safely own one. Although it was unfortunate that it happened to Heidi, the calico cat has become the symbol for the importance of checking up on the elderly and their animals. Since her rescue, Pennsylvania's Animal Rescue League Shelter Wildlife Center started a fund to support animals that can no longer be cared for by their senior citizen owners. Through the program, the goal is to find loving and caring home for all animals whose elderly owners can no longer care for them or have passed away. This way, people know that senior citizens and their pets are both being looked out for.